to be here today. I know there's a great lineup of speakers here to talk pretty much of everything that you need to do to optimize the journey, but ultimately deals are getting stuck. I think we all know this. You can read LinkedIn, the rise of the no decision, everything is going up to the C-suite. So that's about what we're going to talk to today, how to break through and avoid the dreaded no decision. So Jenny, if you can go ahead and jump in to that next slide. So let's get started. The focus here today is speaking the language of the C-suite. And if you said money, you're not wrong, but that's really only part of it. Simply telling a prospect that they're going to save time, money, increase productivity, grow ARR really isn't enough. So Jenny, if you can just go ahead and jump along. I think what companies have done and what marketers have done for so long is, the generic case studies, testimonials, white papers, proposals that are sent over, pricing, and it's just not enough anymore. They're oversimplified. Generally, the reps can't explain what happened behind the scenes. They've got their talking points on the case study, but there's not enough there. They lack alignments with key initiatives, and the data ends up going out there without the storytelling. And what's even worse is they're not tied to the strategic initiatives. So we're going to go ahead and jump in and about how to take care of that. Jenny, if you can go ahead, click a couple, I think. Just keep going. Apologize all. This is the generic business case template just isn't enough anymore. So what we're going to talk about today, what is value selling? Why is it so important today? Given this is the RevTech Summit, we'll talk about the technology, how to scale across your org, and then we'll wrap up with just improving those C-level conversations. Let's keep going. So let's start first with what actually is value selling, and feel free to jump into the comments and chat about what you're doing with value selling. I'll try to keep my eyes on that as well. But at the core, value selling is the approach. It enables your team and your sellers and your customer success pros, let's definitely keep them in mind, to become more consultative, to focus less on the products, less on the features, less on the speed and feeds, and more on aligning with the strategic pillars that a company has in mind and what they uniquely consider impactful. So, in the past, our case studies and marketers really wanted to guide the discussion, but what we need to do right now is listen a lot more. It gives your team the opportunity to quantify and map their solution to those challenges. And then the great thing about it is it can really be done throughout the buyer's journey. And if you do it well, it actually can help really improve your discovery process. So let's jump to the next slide and talk a little bit about why this is so important today. So Gartner's out there telling us, and many of you have probably seen this, that access to the C-suite is getting harder. There's shorter sales cycles, higher prices, higher win rates. And getting value right, being able to communicate this is going to help you grow your accounts by as much as 5%. What you need to do, though, is enable those champions to actually get out there and get to the C-suite. And we've seen this a lot. We know that value selling can deliver, and when it's done right. So let's go ahead and keep talking through there. Many of you are facing this increased competition, the buyer-led journey. The buyers are very far through the sales cycle. And then simply there's just not budget in many cases. You've got new competitors that are lining up. Tools are really starting to consolidate, sprawl. And again, fewer dollars available. So the CFOs are in charge. We talked to a customer last week who they sell big deals, but they said even the smallest deals that they have are going up to the C-suite. And this customer said they were meeting with a healthcare CFO, and they basically said, I'm not approving any deal unless it maps to one of our 5 key initiatives. And when I do, I'm going to go with the one that the highest net present value. So it's really becoming less and less of an option to go into a deal without a business case. And Jenny, I know last session it was great interaction. So feel free to let me know if jump in and ask some questions, and let's get a dialogue going. I think happy to do that as well. So, we did a study, and there's a lot of research out there. Buyers are really looking for every reason to walk away. For those of you who have read the Jolt book, you know that they're timid. They don't want to take on the risk. Are they actually risking their job? And the reasons that they're backing out of deals, there's many of them. But if you look at the top couple, especially that second one, they're simply not convinced that your product is worth the price and that it's going to make a big enough difference. So they're actually willing to stay with the status quo because you haven't convinced them that this is going to make a big enough difference. Let's go ahead, jump in, keep going. So thing is, it's not just getting harder to sell, which is what many of us are facing. It's also harder to buy. And the buyer is doing a majority of the research before they talk to the seller, and they've informed. When they do actually start to talk to the vendors, they generally come in with a short list, and they give just 5% of their time to let the seller make a difference. So what you're looking at there is, how do you give your seller everything they can do to make the most of every single conversation? And then when they're not talking to you during that dead period, how do you help them go make the case internally so they can act quickly, make an impact, and engage the rest of their team with value? You need to make every meeting count and really be lining up the business case throughout the process so that they will take it up to the C-suite and the people that need to make the decisions. The good news here is that buyers actually want this. 66% are saying that they want the ROI case. They want you to help them make an impact, make a difference, and help them go. And we've done some research as well, and high-performing organizations are much more likely to incorporate value assessments into their cycle, and not just make it a step in your process. Hey, let's check the box, but make it a core piece that actually drives the rest of the discussion. So let's keep going here. And I quoted Gartner before, but do love this chart. The reality is that this is a buyer study from last year, and business cases are at the very top of boosting confidence. So that's ahead of even free POCs. I think these days, many of us feel like we need to go out there and do a POC, and that's obviously an investment from your team. But the right type of business case development can drive that confidence home. So let's go ahead and get into the tech. What is really key here is the breadth of value selling solutions. So I think traditionally a lot of people have thought of it as a TCO calculator, an ROI calculator, sometimes the cost of doing nothing. But today there's so many more opportunities that you can infuse value throughout your sales cycle. We've talked about business cases, and we will talk about those a lot because they are at the core. But much broader, you can use value tools to really drive the discovery. So it's not just checking off the box and your seller's filling out a couple of questions, but you can guide them through, a WYSIWYG self-guided journey where it's dynamic and it changes based on the questions. You can do maturity assessments. Many marketers are using value tools for lead generation and to put them on the website, especially for PLG, to start to gain interest and to figure out, how do I capture that data and how do I use that beyond? Proposal generation can be key as well, infusing that value so you don't just throw a number at them, but you're able to highlight your key differentiators and really speak to the messages from the top as well. So, what I'm probably hearing, or what many of you are thinking, and it would be great, feel free to post it in the chat. Many of you are likely saying, we have a value team, they already do this, and that's great. The truth is that they'll love it. In most cases, value teams are understaffed and underfunded. So if you're lucky enough to have that in your organization, the question is, do you have enough value consultants? And you can stay on this slide, I think. Those value consultants are expensive resources, and they're often only earmarked for the biggest deals. And what we're really talking about today is, how do you empower every seller to be the consultant? How do you empower each of one of them to really uncover those growth levers so that they can go in and every deal can get that same attention. This is where tech comes in because it allows you to scale that team's reach, to leverage the insights and all the great mind share that these value engineers have and roll it across your sales force. Some of you may also be thinking, oh, we've got a spreadsheet that does this. And spreadsheets can be great, but they also have a lot of challenges. So they're manual. They tend to lack credibility. Your sales reps are rarely able to explain the variables. They're not going to produce an output report. They're going to produce some numbers, but it's not going to have a lot of context. It's not going to tell a story with it. For those of you in marketing, you know that people buy on emotion. Even the CFO, they want that story alongside. There's also a lot of governance issues. You share the spreadsheet outside, and people can start to share that, maybe you don't win that deal. It gets exposed. So there's a lot of challenges with spreadsheets too, and this is where tech can really come in. I'm seeing a question in the chat. If you were meeting with a newer sales leader and marketing leader, what's the number one piece of advice you'd tell them that would help drive revenue? That's an interesting question. I think since we're talking here today about value, you have to personalize and customize. Generic just simply doesn't cut it. And you're leaving dollars on the table if you're not getting ahead of them. So they're telling you, many of you have conversation intelligence tools deployed in your organization. You're recording the conversations already. You're listening to them tell you explicitly what matters to them. And then you're probably going back to them and giving them, the proposal may have a line item or two, but you're not actually tying to their growth drivers. Each organization you meet with has something different that they're working towards. And the more you can tie to it and personalize, the more likely your project, your solution or service is going to rise to the top and be one of those that gets the checkbox. Let's go ahead and jump into the next slide here. So let's talk really about how to build an effective business case. And this will kind of dive into why tech really is important today. So, it's truly part of discovery. You want to identify the problem in the customer's actual language, using their exact words. Those are probably words that they're using internally in their meetings when they're having these decisions as well. You want to recommend your solution. It looks like we might have lost a couple words here, but that's great. But you don't want to just dive specifically into software product. You want to talk about how you're going to fix the problem in a way that maybe they haven't thought of. You're going to talk about your unique differentiators. You're going to help illustrate how they go from current state to the ideal state. When you talk about an impact on an organization, the details matter. So you're going to communicate, you want to validate it and really show similar customers that have done similar things. You want to talk about the additional benefits, the primary pain, who else stands to benefit. And a lot of times when you're doing this, the customer hasn't even thought through all the pain, all the ancillary challenges that their situation is creating. So if you do this properly, you can start to expose some of those throughout your process as well. And then finally, you're going to dive into a timeline. You want to keep it very realistic. You don't want to sugarcoat things just to get the deal because that's going to set something up later. And then finally, the payoff, the investment summaries. So you're going to tie that together. This is what it matters, and this is how quickly you're going to be able to see your returns. So really talking about the benefits of RevTech and why this matters, it's scale. So whether you have 10 sellers or 100 sellers or 1,000 sellers, rarely can you go just deploy a tool. It's not like it's all tools. They don't just deploy on their own. So you want to make it as easy as possible for them to come in and self-serve. You want it to be dynamic. So ask yourself, do different industries use our solutions in different ways? Do they have different initiatives? Do they have different personas, company size? Does that matter? So what you want are solutions that are really going to allow you to change, when you click this box, that it actually creates almost a choose your own adventure and it opens up the next box. It's not this standard for every industry, for every customer that you have. You're going to want to keep it governed. compliance, and you're going to want to make sure that there's a story in there, that it's really going to help tell your story and integrate, collect all the data, and hold your sellers accountable. Let's keep going. So I think the other aspect of this is, you want to make it easy for your sellers to go generate these and report on them based on the customer inputs and challenges. And so you want to set this aside basically along with all your other content pieces. At the core, if you're developing content and you're expecting your sellers to send it out at different points in the journey, that's exactly what the business cases are as well. And just like you track, are these being opened? Are they collected? You want to be able to get all those same attribution insights as well to understand what's most effective. And then measure and understand where does it impact. You want to know essentially who's opening it, who's not opening it. If you're trying to speak to the CFO, are they actually looking at it? Did they share it with 5 more people in the buying committee? Did they spend time just on the pricing page, or did they spend time on one of the key aspects that you're trying to call out? That's all going to help your sellers and your managers guide the next conversation. Let's go ahead and keep jumping. Yeah, this is great. So in short, you definitely want to use your value selling to uncover the buyer's priorities and challenges, to quantify things like the cost of doing nothing, to configure the best solution to address their priority challenges, to articulate the investment requirements and what really matters to them, and then to present the relevant success stories. So the last thing you want to do is give them anything that is actually not relevant to them at that time. I'm not going to dive too deep into this, but I do think, for everyone who's on the call today, really take a moment to think about where you are on this value selling journey. Are you operating with spreadsheets? That's definitely, a first step, and it's a first phase, and you want to be doing that if you're not doing anything else. You want to keep in mind that you generally lack version control and security, and you're not able to track usage. You're probably also not able to tie that data back into the CRM and the map so you can use them in other ways, but it's a great first step. Start to think about where you want to be as you evolve your 2024 plans. Do you want to scale it across other sellers? Do you want more interactive tools? And then, again, as you start to phase it up there, you take those value insights where people are engaging and you start to tie them into the sales cycle, how they're impacting deals. And then further on, the world class is really when you get aligned with all your critical business systems, and you're using that to advance rep performance, to really coach your reps on what they should be doing next, and to drive improvement in your entire sales process. So in short, happy to take questions and have a conversation with Jenny, but, think about where your team sits. Understand that most companies aren't doing it this way yet. And those have a real competitive advantage. And then think about it while you're building your value team. The reality is they're doing great stuff for the deals that they can touch, but this is just something that can't be manual, and we can't keep throwing people at right now. So how can technology help you?
Hey, Lindsey. Thank you for your presentation and for spending the time with us today. I did have a few questions. So what's the biggest challenge you've seen companies have with adopting value selling across the board, and how can they overcome this?
That's a great one. So I think what happens, and this goes for probably most of the conversations you're going to have today, you can't deploy a tool and just expect a tool to work on its own. You need to get your managers on board. You need to have accountability. You need to be tracking usage and adoption. You also need to remember that sellers generally don't learn how to use something until they're actually in the moment using it. So how can you apply some instructions and make sure that there's enablement behind it? And then I would say the biggest thing is to really come together and start to show results. Once you show it, that customer that I was talking about, they truly have a 5x difference in win rate. And you start to show that to the other reps who aren't using it. And all of a sudden they say, hey, I'd like to boost my quota too. I mean, I'd like to be attaining and be on that list. So I think it really boils down to a tool is just a tool. And it really, people behind it matter as well.
Yeah. One thing you also mentioned just during it was kind of like the challenges of spreadsheets. And maybe that's not always the most reliable form. At MediaFly, is there anything or a tool or a technology that you guys are using that really helps to either simplify that process or create a more secure process?
Yeah, so MediaFly does offer these solutions. So we use our own tools, which is not what I'm here. I mean, my goal is to get as many people out there value selling as there possibly can. And whether you use our technology or you use spreadsheets or you use, there's lots of great tools out there. I think the checklist that we were going through about how to think about it and make sure you're not putting generic numbers out there, that you can really back it up, that they apply to ask yourself, what is the customer thinking about and what do they care about? Because if you go back to them and you say, great, this is going to save you 10%, 40%, and you just throw numbers out there, I think all of us gloss over those numbers that are, and we're guilty, right? They're on our website too. But most definitely at the C level, they gloss over those numbers. You have to make it hyper relevant to them today, or you're going to struggle to get your deal over the line.
Yeah. Well, thank you again. If someone wanted to get in contact with you just to talk about value selling, or if they had questions, what's the best way they can get in contact with you?
Yeah, reach out to me on LinkedIn. It's simply first name, last name. You can find me on there. If you'd like a copy of that maturity model, I'm happy to send that out as well. So we've got some other guides, plenty out there, and appreciate the time today.
Yeah, thank you again, Lindsey. Fantastic presentation. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, thank you.